Thanks very much, Geraldine. Well, it's a delight to be with you, even though I am presenting from Melbourne, where it is raining and heading fast towards winter. I'm talking today as a representative of Aria Research, and I have an unusual role there in that I'm not a huge fan of technology, but somehow I've found myself working for a company that's creating assistive technology for people who are blind. So how do I get into this situation? I want to acknowledge the fact that I'm presenting from the lands of the Wurundjeri mob, our Aboriginal people in Victoria, and my colleague Julianne Bell is from Queensland, where the Waka Waka mob were the first people in the place where she lives as well. So Aria Research is a Sydney-based startup company that began during COVID and actually has an international team in Melbourne, Queensland, both in Australia as well as Sydney, the Philippines, Florida, California and Japan. And so we came together via Zoom for the first few years, and now that we're starting to do lab-based research with our technology, I'm going to have to move to Sydney. I am working with this company because from the very first conversation with the CEO, it became apparent that this organisation is committed to co-design as they develop technology with and for people who are blind. So as part of this group, we've got what we call the venture team. They're the leadership team. We've got a machine perception team, and they're the ones that are making sense of camera vision mounted, that's going to be mounted into glasses, and using deep learning to help that transform that vision into an audio soundscape. The human perception team, which I'm part of, and we haggle a lot about how we each perceive what's around us as we travel through the environment and how to interpret that into a soundscape. Then we've got a training team and those who are responsible for product development so that the technology that we come up with is actually user-friendly and safe to work with. Sorry. Why am I involved and Julianne? Well, Aria Research began by consulting with end users. And in other words, they began by consulting with blind people about what they need. Not only consulting with, but Aria already employed 3 blind subject matter experts before I even came on the scene. And that was very exciting to me, but they also employ 3 orientation and mobility specialists. And this is a rare thing in our field because we're used to being employed more specifically in the university sector or doing direct client work. And so I discovered that Aria values orientation and mobility and functional assessment, which is my particular interest. So the Aria glasses that our group is working on developing for people who are blind rather than having low vision, they have cameras which are forward facing, which gather information about the scene ahead. And then the glasses are connected by a cord to a smartphone, which contains the software, Aria software, that converts the camera vision into a spatial soundscape that combines, it's not just describing what's out there as many apps do, we're actually ascribing sounds to things that are otherwise silent. So it's almost a little like echolocation in that it's giving additional information to our natural hearing in order to embellish the soundscape and give more information about things that would otherwise not make noises in the environment. The Aria glasses, Aria stands for augmented reality in audio. So instead of having a visual output with augmented reality, such as is normal in the leisure and entertainment industries, this group is creating a soundscape from the camera vision. So how did we come by co-design, and what is co-design? Really, it's nothing about us without us. So our team tries to not assume what it is that blind people need to navigate the environment. It's about going to end users of the technology early to find out what matters, what's frustrating, and what would improve quality of life. We're also collaborating with other relevant stakeholders like family, friends, carers, referring professionals, ophthalmologists who want to know what they can do for people who they can no longer offer services to, because there's nothing more can be done for their vision. There are retailers and distributors, as well as funding bodies, that we're engaging with in relation to design of the product. Co-design means working out more egalitarian procedures. So giving everyone a fair hearing. It means that we have to rethink how we do meetings and how we communicate with each other electronically. And there is definitely a power shift in team dynamics. It is not, co-design doesn't work very well with top-down dynamics. It also requires iterative design. So there's a long history of technologies being devised for people who are blind without much consultation. And those end users are just brought in at the end to test out whether the technology works and whether they approve or not, by which time it's often too late to make significant changes. And there are many, many devices in the technology graveyard that have either not made it to commercialisation or have had a short shelf life. And so our team's keen to investigate, and we do keep investigating the technology graveyard to see what went wrong or why things have been discarded, and how we can prevent those problems in our own design. So the idea of co-design is that it leads to a commercial product and optimises fit for purpose for people who are using it. And we've got a picture here of Julianne, my colleague, at Sydney Central Station. And of course, everywhere that we go together, we're sort of assessing it from the point of view of what's important here, that our technology might translate into the soundscape to acknowledge hazards or show the best wayfinding path, that kind of thing. So I've got a video here where Julianne's demonstrating one of the conversations that we have during co-design process.
So how is the task that tests out whether the sounds are feasible or not going to work?
So I think we could make it very consistent and very simple. So let's pretend that the sound of my hands clapping is representative of, let's say, a mosquito. I know that's a bit weird, but it's that gotcha. It's that funny Australian thing. So I think you would have a voice, preferably not, we have to talk about the voice because there are some people that have trouble. Yeah, the voice must have an Australian accent or a neutral accent, because people struggle with the American accent voice, because these things are usually done with a synthetic voice, unless they're going to be pre-recorded, like with a natural voice.
And what's the voice going to say?
TV. Like that. It's going to say, this is the sound for a mosquito, or it'll say mosquito sound, or something like that. We'll choose a set of words that are used all the time.
Mm-hmm.
So it might say mosquito sound, speed, repetition. Fast as it needs to go. Because for some people, when you speed up the repetition, it changes the way they perceive and understand the sound.
What would cause the sound to repeat more quickly so that the speed increased?
So in the experiment last year, the closer and more focused you were to an object, the faster was the repetition of the sound.
Okay, so it's nearness.
Yeah, so if they were going to continue, if Aria continues along that vein, then people need to be able to understand the sound in repetition.
So So just an example, were you able to hear that?
So how?
Yes.
I hope. Oh, good. I hope I hadn't just given you 2 minutes of silence. Just an example of the kinds of crazy conversations that we have during co-design about all kinds of obscure things, because it's about drilling down to the details that matter when people can't see it all. And we find still as a light dependent research team mostly that we're still anchoring everything back to a visual world, and we've had to learn to think much more about the blind world. So our research questions, when we were looking at doing an audit of co-design at Aria Research, is what represents best practice in co-design? How are we already practicing co-design at Aria Research, and how can we improve our co-design practices? So this work was done by myself, by Julianne, who you just saw, and Glenn, who's this very tall fellow here, who's a sound engineer. And we started by looking at the literature to explore what's considered best practice in relation to co-design. Then we used an integral model to think comprehensively about co-design at Aria. Then had a round of emails and meetings, because at this point we're not all in one place, we're still sort of scattered in 3 states in Australia, in order to examine the internal practices of our organisation. So we were looking for co-design in our organisational structures at Aria. We were looking for co-design in our research protocol development and practices, and also the ethics around vulnerability and power and pay. And you'll be pleased to hear that the outcomes were that we do have some recommendations to improve accessibility for all, but also we did some fun professional development for the team, and we'll continue to do that. And this audit happened last year during 2022. So I'm going to skip very quickly through the literature, because if you're interested in co-design, it is there, publicly available. We found information from the GREAT Summit, the Global Research, Innovation and Education on Assistive Technology Summit. They prompted us to think about products, assistive products, but also assistive systems, the end users and other stakeholders when thinking about co-design. Great article called "Are You Really Doing Co-Design?" that warned us to beware of tokenism. In other words, tacking a little bit of consultation with the end users of our technology on the end of the process. It also, I found this quite interesting, the challenge to super users. Some people sort of almost make a career out of being consultants about assistive technology, and we need to ask, are they so proficient in that process that the tech development team loses touch with people directly, a range of people directly using technology and struggling with it, frankly, out in the community? It's about power share, having a voice. We found that language is a problem, and there is a plague of acronyms in this world of technology development. This article also prompted us to look at accessibility and the ethics of fair pay. Another article focusing on vulnerable populations said consider recruitment, engagement, power differentials, health. The health question was an interesting one, because often the end users of assistive technology are users of assistive technology because they have health issues. And it's really important in co-design to accommodate those health issues. So if there's a best time of day for that person to consult, then the team needs to fit with that best time of day. Or if there are seasons or weeks when a person is in and out of good health, it's really important to accommodate that in consulting. Economic and social impact, and also funding. There was an interesting acronym here called INVOLVE. So invest in co-design, do a needs assessment, look at the vision, the roles and responsibilities and rewards, people involved, validate the participants, organise interactions really carefully. We certainly learned about that one. Lead the engagement, value patient time and input, and evaluate and report. So some useful learnings from the literature, but that brought us to do our own integral model of co-design. Now, if you haven't come across an integral model before, it's actually a content-free matrix that always has on the left side these categories of individual and then collective thinking, and then internal and external. So if we look at this first quadrant, this is basically about my personal internal experience when engaging in co-design with Aria. So what are my personal strengths and limitations? What do I bring? What attitudes do I bring? What is my sense of safety? What are my personality preferences? What's my motivation for being involved? What's my knowledge of the blind world? And what is my knowledge of vision-related assistive technology? So it's an invitation really for anyone in the team to ask those questions of themselves. But there are some individual things that are externally visible, like defined roles and responsibilities, position descriptions for individuals. Is an individual person on the payroll, or are they a volunteer? How much voice do they have, and how do they like to communicate? And what professional development have they undertaken in order to get that embodied learning about the blind world? But then we shift from the individual to the collective, and from an Aria point of view, and actually from any organisation, you end up with gatekeepers, or in the words of Harry Potter, secret keepers, who know key information in an organisation. And it can take a while to find out who those people are. Who are the administrators? In the human perception team, we've got, research processes and the product that are coming together. In the human perception team, we have a particular meeting culture, and we allow X amount of time for frivolity and silliness, and then we get on with the job. There are some inclusive practices that we've actually had to work hard at, because we discovered that we had very excluding practices as well. It takes us a while, in coming from different professional disciplines, to come up with a shared language in our culture within our team. But we are exceptionally good at blue sky thinking and brainstorming in our team. What can people see externally about our team? Well, we're pretty good at grant applications. There's a bit of a presence on our website. We try and say who we are in our email signatures and our affiliations. We have a monthly online conversation about technology, and now an email listserv called our Tech Bugs Blind User Group listserv, and also any publications and presentations that we put out. So we were really considering whether we do co-design well in all of these quadrants. What we discovered was that Aria does have end users on the payroll from right at the start, which is terrific. We have regular team meetings where our blind team members are very vocal, thank you, in the meetings, and actively involved in some working groups where they're actually leading sort of design questions. We're co-writing procedures, we're co-writing grants, we're co-writing articles and presentations, and there's lots of informal sharing via email, video and phone calls. We also have a pretty good track record with engaging volunteer end users. So instead of just inviting people, recruiting people to test technology, we have a process which we call expressions of interest. So we invite people to express interest in Aria Research, and then do a triage kind of process where we invite people to join the conversation about technology every month, to do podcasts with us, to, you know, engage with the team on the topic of interest, come in and play with the technology and talk with us about what matters to them, and as well as engaging in clinical trials and email and video sharing. So often blind volunteer end users will share us videos of technology that does and doesn't work, or share devices. Julianne in the team occasionally feels like taking her bat and ball and going home, because what she's taught us is that if we don't share documents 24 hours before a meeting, then she is doubly excluded from participation, because there's not enough time for her to catch up with the document that people are showing on screen share and listening into the conversation and what gets put into the chat, and her phone is going off in the background all the time. And that double exclusion means that she's not only, she's unable to participate fully in the meeting, but she goes away with a sense that her contribution is not valued, and her sense of self plummets each time this happens. After nagging people to share, we decided that the team needed an immersion learning experience, such as we have when we put the blindfold on and learn our long cane skills. So we got them to put on a podcast or some background noise, and we presented 20 minutes of blank screen sharing slides where Julianne and I were very confident about what we were presenting and pointing out all kinds of interesting things on the screen that of course they could not see, and they got the message by the end of this and began to start sharing PowerPoint presentations and things before the meeting next time, which was terrific. So we found ways to improve our co-design in our meetings by circulating information at least the day before, in our document design by formatting according to roundtable guidelines for print access, and particularly putting alt text on all our pictures. Using accessible platforms for collaboration and co-writing. The organisation uses the Google Workspace, but it's a nightmare apparently with JAWS. And so we need to actually download things and circulate Word documents via email and use track changes for it to be inclusive. We need to do frequent team immersive professional development, not just telling people about things, but getting the blindfold on again. We need to offer hospitality at our tech lab by having a concierge there that makes it feel like a safe place for people who come in to help us out who are blind, because some of our team members are still very awkward working around people who are blind. We also need research rigor, and so we have a bit of a policy of going with embedded mixed methods, which means that we capture our participants' voice and give it due analysis, qualitative analysis alongside the numbers and measures that we capture, because the participants' opinions help us to interpret the measurement data, and that's really, really important to us. So co-design does require a fundamental power shift within the team, and we're learning to norm reference blindness rather than full vision for this population that we're working with and for. Co-design means it is safe to be vulnerable. We aim for inclusion, but that's not going far enough. We're actually aiming for mutuality and belonging for everyone in the team. Co-design is not all about blindness. There are things that other people in the team need to have in order to find our team processes accessible. And so we try and listen deeply to what everyone's needs are so that everyone feels included. And just a reminder that inaccessible practices, whether it's around low vision or blindness or not, are doubly disabling because they obstruct participation in the moment and they erode a person's sense of worthiness to belong. So if you want to contact us, or if you want a copy of the PowerPoint presentation, please feel free to be in touch. My email address is down the bottom here, and also happy to be contacted on WhatsApp if you prefer to talk. And that's it from me, Geraldine.
Lil, thanks a million. What I'm going to do is ask if there's anybody here has questions for you. No? Any questions? No hands up. You're free. All right, Lil, thank you. That was really interesting and lovely to see you again. And thank you for joining us from Melbourne.
My pleasure.